It was another great week on General Hospital. Valentine tried to convince Carly that all of Jack's seemingly good deeds were mainly just to manipulate her. But how do we know Valentine wasn't the one manipulating her once Carly realized Jack's moves weren't acts of loyalty, but leverage? She stopped hesitating and committed fully to taking him down. Willow's trial was like a tennis match. Watching Ada Turner and Alexis volley back and forth. Missing traffic footage, shaky evidence, and testimony that kept pointing in uncomfortable directions forced the prosecution onto the defensive. Alexis seized every opening, while Turner pushed motive hard, especially once Willow's past her weapons training at dawn of day and her personal entanglements were dragged into the light. By week's end, the case felt less about certainty and more about how badly the investigation may have been mishandled. Britt revealed the truth about her time under Sidwell's control to Brad, including forced work on an illegal cold fusion project and medication that kept her alive while keeping her trapped. Meanwhile, Jason and Jess began connecting dots, realizing Britt wasn't the only expendable piece in play. And speaking of Britt, in a rare moment of levity amid the chaos, Brad and Britt ordered a big, expensive meal, ditched the bill, and shared a giddy spark of rebellion, only for Chase to promptly shut it down with an arrest. I would have used screenshots of Britt bolting from the restaurant and then Brad, but they moved so fast that they were too blurry. However, I will note a tiny detail that I missed the first time I watched it. When they ran, Brad left his credit card on the table, which was how the cops were able to find them. That was a nice blink and you miss it moment, and I missed it, so the rest came as a surprise to me. But when I later watched it with my wife, she spotted that right away once Tracy learned that Drew had confiscated all of her Quartermain heirlooms. She was on the warpath. She called Martin and told him that while he had previously been assured there would be no repercussions for his faking Monica's will, that deal went out the window when Drew stole her stuff. After their conversation, Brooke Lynn showed him the door and hilariously shoved him from behind, pushing him out of the mansion. Looking at the sky as if he was angry at the universe, and with nothing in front of him to punch in anger, he threw a punch in the air in a fit of rage. As Tracy tried wrapping her brain around the fact that Drew had all of her heirlooms, she asked Brooke Lynn, "So you're saying they are now at Drew's house, absorbing all the evil that lives within his walls?" Tracy tells Martin that he'd better get back her family heirlooms, or you're going to be handing out toilet bowl hooch for Christmas. Dante told Lulu that he had to get to the courthouse so he could take the stand as a witness, and asked that since she's covering it for the newspaper, just, try not to make me sound like a complete idiot. Lulu hilariously responded, "It's my job to report the facts." This week, it was a three-way tie for who had the best outfit. Jack was dressed in a sharply tailored navy suit with a dark shirt and tie that kept the look controlled, expensive, and deliberately and flashy, the kind of outfit that projects authority before he even speaks. Ada Turner countered this with crisp courtroom precision in a bright white button-down shirt tucked into a fitted light gray pencil skirt, the high contrast pairing coming across as clean, clinical, and quietly intimidating, all business with no excess. Willow, meanwhile, wore a deep blue patterned dress that immediately draws the eye, the saturated blue popping against the muted background and table setting, giving her visual presence even in a restrained scene. The V-neck softened her silhouette while the print added texture, and paired with the warm tones of the wine glass and food, the blue felt emotionally charged rather than somber, subtly underscoring that Willow was holding back more than she was saying. As I may have mentioned before, GH doesn't have very many pop culture references, but there were some good ones this week. While poor Tracy was getting angrier by the minute that Congressman Cutthroat purloined her Quartermain heirlooms, Brooke Lynn referred to them as tchotchkes. That's a Yiddish word for an item that's intended to be decorative, not functional. Think knick-knack or trinket. Brad and Britt were talking over dinner before they ditched, and Brad was asking about how Lucas was doing. He then remarked, That their paths probably didn't cross because they work in different departments, Britt replied. Well, like life and dinosaurs, Lucas finds a way. She was quoting the film Jurassic Park, where chaos theorist Dr. Ian Malcolm Jeff Goldblum states, life, finds a way. He was emphasizing that life's inherent drive for survival and expansion overcomes barriers, challenging mankind's need to control nature, as seen when dinosaurs breed despite being all female, thus proving that life breaks free. And I thought it was a nice touch on Thursday's episode when Valentin made a reference to Hulu, which was one of the few things he could do to occupy his time while he hid in Carly's pantry or attic. That's a great sort of in-house advertising that didn't hurt the show's budget. Okay, so for this week, there were 2 separate scenes that had some good camera work, but I couldn't fit them all onto one image effectively. So I'm presenting 2 separate images to better show off the fine work. Above is the first one from the courtroom. There was a nicely framed shot of Alexis questioning Dante, with the judge looking on in the background. It must be hard on a show with very little prep, rehearsal, and recording time to make some creative shots, but they always manage to get them in whenever possible. The next image, depicted above, is a split-screen shot of someone peering into the Quartermain mansion while Tracy explained to Michael that she saw him driving away from Drew's house before she went in and found him shot. We don't yet know who that is, but the skulker sure got an earful. What they do with that info remains to be seen. Britt has a degree in physics, so she can understand cold fusion. Is that a retcon? I've been wondering about that a short time ago. I even said to my wife that, between the DNA formulas and the holographic brain seen in Dalton's lab, and the fact that Faison's final project is supposed to be about cold fusion, how does an obstetrician fit in? So it makes sense that they would rewrite her history a bit and say that physics was in her background. It makes far more sense than Robert somehow getting a law degree in between chasing bad guys around the globe as a spy. There was an interesting throwaway line in Monday's episode that's either a seed they were planting or just a detail to give breadth to the show. Jack was filling Jocelyn on a plane that went down, which wasn't Valentin's plane. What makes it cool is that it's a cool little nugget that may not mean anything. Then again, at one point, Britt got a phone call that popped up as blocked, and surprise, it was Jack, which immediately sent the logic of modern phones into witness protection. If the number was simply unknown, it should say unknown. If it were actually blocked, at least in any universe where phones behave like phones, it wouldn't announce itself as blocked at all. The call would just not appear. What we're left with is a tiny but nagging technicality, the sort of thing that makes you pause mid-scene and mutter, "That's not how any of this works," before the show blithely marches on. Firmly confident that no one in the audience has ever owned a cell, I'm thinking that the skulker outside of the Quartermain mansion could either be Felicia or Spinelli, both RPs who would be able to evade the security and get onto the property. Or it's somehow one of Sidwell's henchmen, as he would never risk getting himself caught doing something like that. Britt tells Brad that she took orders straight from the top, meaning Sidwell, which sounds very definitive until you remember. The show previously winked at the idea that Sidwell might not actually be the top, just the man currently holding the clipboard. There was at least an implication of someone higher up the villainous food chain, a shadowy figure above Sidwell, calmly sipping espresso while he does the yelling. So either Britt genuinely believed she was reporting to the ultimate big bad, or she was a mid-level henchperson blissfully unaware there's an even larger henchperson manager lurking overhead, complete with a swivel chair and a world domination flowchart. In soap terms, that usually means the hierarchy hasn't finished unfolding yet, which is how you know someone worse is almost certainly waiting in the wings. I really liked the conversation between Jason and Jocelyn, mostly because it didn't snap into instant trust the way soaps sometimes do when they're in a hurry. It took actual talking, some careful verbal tiptoeing, for them to land in the same place. Joss has treason practically hovering over her shoulder if she says one word. To many, while Jason is still mentally filing her under small child who once needed a juice box. By the end, though, something clicks, and you start quietly rooting for the inevitable future scenes where they're no longer negotiating trust but standing back to back, dispatching an army of faceless henchmen who exist solely to confirm that this partnership was always overdue. I absolutely yelled at the TV during Wednesday's episode when Nina told Carly that the evidence against Willow would be rather shaky. Which is a wonderfully subtle way of shouting, I know something I absolutely should not know. Between that little slip and the faintly pleased smile she wore in court once it was confirmed the evidence